I'm Christopher Lydon, and this is Open Source with the Nobel Prize novelist from Turkey, Orhan Pamuk. It is not your standard book chat. It's closer, in fact, to headbutting than conversation, as you'll hear, but it's polite enough, and nobody gets hurt in the next half hour or so. Orhan Pamuk wanted to talk about his hardcover collection of notebook drawings and diary entries in recent years. I wanted to hear the global writer's take on the distemper, East and West, in the 2020s. He said he doesn't talk contemporary affairs, but then he insisted on doing just that. He said President Erdogan's authoritarian politics is ruining Turkey, and that Donald Trump could be just as dangerous in America. The news about Orhan Pamuk himself, coming out of his notebooks, is that he has been a passionately visual artist all along, keeping an alternative record of his own life in high-colored drawings and aphoristic jottings, words and pictures like nothing that I or our listeners have ever seen, unless they draw their own. Until you were 22, I take it the plan was to be a painter.
Yes, I was raised in a family of civil engineers. My grandfather being a civil engineer, my uncle, my father going to the same Istanbul Technical University. And I was pressured to go to the same civil engineering school and be an architect. But since I was drawing, and everyone thought that I would be a painter, they said, why don't you be like Le Corbusier, who was making money by architecture and who was privately doing cubist paintings. And I decided to do that. But a screw was loose in my head at the age of 22. And suddenly I quit studying architecture, the desire to be a painter, and sat at a table and began writing novels. I can't even explain the mystery of it myself. It took a whole book to explain it.
And the combination, words and pictures, are still wonderfully feeding one another. Glowing orange and pink felt-tip impressions of Urbino in Italy, for example, which you dub the ideal city. Or in the woods at Tolstoy's family estate, where the great old writer said he was disgusted with himself and ready to die. But also in these quick prose diary captions in a handsome hardcover titled Memories of Distant Mountains. Your wife, you say, urged you not to reveal too much, but you go right on, sounding a lot like yourself. Work, Orhan, work, you write. And then, calm down, Orhan, which you add should be the title, the name of this notebook. You celebrate the Arab Spring in 2011, one moment, especially the bloodless overthrow of the Mubarak regime in Egypt. My eyes fill with tears, you note. Why? Because Muslim countries will finally experience democracy. But will they? You're surprised to discover in Egypt that ordinary people are devoted to your President Erdogan in Turkey, partly because of an intervention I don't quite understand in Gaza. And then you write, the men, the loud, aggressive men reminded me of Turkey. That's 15 years ago. We need the rest of the story, maybe even your novel of the Middle East today. We want to sense, among other things, and I do today, whether you feel a certain steady trend towards something like breakdown and maybe ruin in Erdogan's Turkey, in Gaza for sure, in Iran maybe.
Okay.
But also in the imperial United States.
Erdogan's Turkey is, in the last 5 years, really ruined. Erdogan economically was successful in the first 5-10 years, but in the last 3 years, Turkish nation went poor. People are not making enough money, and everyone is frustrated.
What's the feeling?
The feeling is that Erdogan should go. In fact, his votes in polls are around 30%. He's going to do tricks. He's going to put more people into jail. One of the joys of teaching at Columbia and coming to America, United States, or traveling in Europe is I have a 5-minute break and forget about Erdogan because everyone is asking me about Erdogan and politics in Turkey.
But there's Iran, there's Israel itself, but also very present in that scene is the imperial, I think, way overextended the United States.
I don't understand this question.
Oh, no, I just mean, when I think of the Middle East, you can't think of the Middle East in power
Yeah,
terms.
but do I want to talk about Middle East and United States?
I wonder why we don't, frankly. Why we don't talk about the Middle
I
East?
don't want. Okay, I want to talk about this book. I'm not a professor of history of Middle East and in United States involvement in it. Maybe we stop this program and talk about what we talk about.
Let me cut to the chase. We think of you, Orhan Pamuk, as a man of the East and Islam and Turkey.
I'm a man of East, but I'm secular. I belong to Islam in a way. I am a cultural Muslim, but not a devotional Muslim.
All I mean to say, let me finish the thought, that you come out of the East having formed your own soul in that apartment in the Pamuk building in Istanbul, reading the West.
It's not a particularly Turkish thing that I did. That is, reading European literature, aspiring for getting close to European culture. This is what the Russians, this is what Tanizaki, the Japanese writer, this is what the Latin Americans, everyone did it. It's something that I made that inspired by Proust, Thomas Mann, or Virginia Woolf. Add to it Tolstoy or Dostoevsky.
Right.
Everyone, the Indians, the Chinese, every nation has this double edge, so to speak, aspiring to be westernized. And the more they're westernized they are, the more anxiety of losing their identity they have. This is what my novels are all about.
One more try. I thought simply you read us like a book, so to speak, including Faulkner, including our friend and neighbor Henry David Thoreau, and you write beautifully about him. And we want you to keep reading us.
Okay. Well,
our culture, our democracy, our direction.
American culture, I can talk about endlessly. Faulkner
Please.
or Thoreau. Thoreau was a manic scribbler, manic journal keeper. What Italo Calvino called graphomania. And what I learned from Thoreau was he would return to his daily entries a few days later. For him, a journal page is never finished. He would add and add and add. In fact, Walden is based on edited pieces from his journal. I am, in that sense, also a journal keeper.
You remember his first meeting with Emerson in Concord, and Emerson said, "Do you keep a journal, young man?" And Thoreau went right home and he said, the man said, "Do you keep a journal?" And this is the start of it, right here. The point for me, Orhan, is simply I want you to keep reading us, the way he read Walden, the way you read Istanbul, but the way we need to be reminded of who we are and where we're going. I want to ask you what I would ask Tolstoy, were he here today. Where did we miss the turn? We believe you. We honor your ideals, maybe now more than ever, and you especially. Help us.
Look, why don't you see the situation the other way around? I am very happy being in America one semester teaching at Columbia University because I am in many ways repressed by many people like me in Turkey. In that sense, what I see in America, I still enjoy the freedom which Trump could not destroy in his 4 years when he was president. He may destroy it now, and it would be horrible for the rest of the world. But when I come to America, I visited Faulkner's house, I visited many writers' house. I believe in American culture and learned so much from it. But culture does never solve the urgent political problems. Faulkner would not help you with your fight with Trump.
No, I'm not enlisting him, but I'm trying to let you point out things that we don't see about ourselves. And also address what we have to call our unhappiness. We're terribly confused. We can't believe one day's headlines.
But on the other hand, let's not forget that Americans per capita are making 8 times more than a Turkish person is making per capita. So if you ask a Turk, the Americans are unhappy, what we should do, a Turk would say that in Turkey we are eating less, we are enjoying life less, we are intimidated by Erdogan regime. There are some similarities between Erdogan and Trump. They are both authoritarian. Erdogan is more careful, Trump is more reckless, but perhaps his recklessness made him win the elections. Now, I want to say this. This is the end of politics. I won't continue with this. I don't want to comment on Trump and this or that. I don't feel interesting. And you are misevaluating me. I wrote this book. I wrote these books. Enough of Trump and America. If you want to treat me like Tolstoy, that was a compliment. But Tolstoy would leave this conversation if you asked 5 times about American Trump, 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 Trump. Enough.
I hope you're willing to
Also,
talk about this spirit in our country now, what you observe.
I can talk about the spirit in Turkey. My vision is limited. I'm reading New York Times, and I'm in New York, and with Columbia professors. My Columbia professor friends used to ask about Erdogan, and now that there is Trump, no one is asking me about Erdogan.
Let me ask you in a different way. You've planted in my head a word from your book on Istanbul, and the word is huzun.
Okay.
It's a fascinating phenomenon. You say it's the sort of signature emotion of Istanbul that you grew up in. It's a word for melancholy or for regret or loss. When I read that a long time ago in your book, Istanbul, we hadn't come to this particular pass, this particular election, but I thought that's a fascinating thing. In Turkey, it's related, you say, to the loss of empire after the World War I, the loss of the Ottoman Empire.
As I was writing my autobiography and chronicling my life till the age of 22, of course, it was obvious for me that I should talk about my years, my teenage years as a painter. I used to go out to streets of Istanbul, take photos, and then go back to my studio. And I had a studio when I was a teenage and draw paintings of Istanbul like Utrillo, like Pissarro, urban scapes of the town. This book is a sort of continuation of my desire to paint, and I picked up the best pages from my diaries. But later, when I was writing my diaries, I asked myself, what was the feeling that I enjoyed when I was doing these paintings? It was Baudelaire, the French, who invented the idea that the strength or the beauty of a landscape painting is based on the feeling it generates.
Yes.
So I explored 1960s, 70s Istanbul, and of course, obviously, it was hüzün, Turkish melancholy, a feeling, a philosophy, partly based on Sufi mysticism and partly based on what Japanese or American scholars coined the word nobility of failure. It was a feeling of going inwards, not trying to make big money and success, but a mystical or a feeling of being modest. I associated in my Istanbul book and also in my later book, this going inward, resignation, a sort of a resignation from life with the urbanscapes, black and white urbanscapes of Istanbul, which I particularly write and which I painted.
Brilliant photography, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. In order to publish Istanbul, my autobiography, I collected photographs, family photographs, old postcards of Istanbul, and black and white photographs that conveyed the melancholy of the town when it was extremely poor in 50s, 60s, 70s.
Can I say, I've had a feeling of something like that in Lisbon, too. And
they call it sodato.
well,
Okay.
I think it has something to do with, they're a world people, great imperial nation, as the Turks were, but it's over. And something is lost, something is gone.
Yes, I'm sometimes also thinking how much nostalgia is involved in my discovery of urbanscapes of Istanbul and writing about that.
Yeah.
And also how much realism, attention to a city that is growing. When I was born into it, Istanbul was a city of 2.5 million, and now it's 17 million. And I'm a privileged, very lucky person to have witnessed his town, her town, go from 2.5 million to 17 million. There are books that I wrote with a self-imposed agenda of discovering the remote new neighborhoods of my town. I went to these places with a bodyguard beside me, taking photos, talking to people, thinking of a novel that will represent them. This is how I work, how I operate.
I feel I've been there with you almost. You're an incredible reporter. You notice everything. You travel far and wide, including China. But come back to just the mysterious common feeling among millions of people called huzun. I wonder if what would be the word in American English to describe...
Turkish melancholy, I would say.
I'm thinking of our own mood and I've lived here a long time, which is uncertain, is confused.
You're the American. You will have a better answer.
Wonder.
This is not my expertise, This is not what I want to talk about. Why is America declining? This is not my subject. You're asking the wrong questions to me. What I achieved, what I did all my life, is not why America is wrong or this.
Let me ask it a different way. The word globalist, comes across as an insult these days. But by any standards, you're a global writer and novelist, fictionist, and you have millions of readers in China. You're one of the most popular foreign writers, I understand. You have great range, and I guess my impulse would be to say, be a globalist. The world needs one.
No writer ever thinks that he or she is going to write a global novel. You write about your particular place, and the more you focus on your particular place and the more creative you are, suddenly you can get out. Faulkner had never thought of, why don't I write a global novel? There are critics who are writing books, global novel, and then maybe the word global may honor Coca-Cola, but it doesn't honor writers. To call a writer global, if it only means internationally famous, it's okay. But if you say there's a global novel, I think it's fake. There's no such thing. All the writers that I admire, they were busy and they were not joining an anonymous global stream. They were finding their own ways, and I do Strangers in My Mind. I did something else. With Black Book or Museum of Innocence, I wrote about middle classes in Istanbul. With The Strangers in My Mind, I tried for 6 years, I focused on a street vendor, someone who sells boza in the streets of Istanbul. And in the mornings, the same person, he's so poor, sells yogurt. My stories, in the end, yes, most of them are focused in Istanbul, and I search for them, but I don't look for global clues. In The Strangers in My Mind, yes, since I was writing about shanty towns of Istanbul, I researched Haravi, the Bombay shanty town,
right,
and favelas of Rio de Janeiro, and looking, are they similar? Can I find some trends? That may be looking for similarities, for global trends, but they were different, really. Brazilian favelas were much poorer, and Bombay's Haravi turned out to be more or less a factory, a business space.
When I think of a global writer, he's one who not only is writing for a global audience, but has read the global legacy. That's a famous scene in your life. The boy in the apartment reading Proust and Faulkner and Nabokov and John Updike and coming at the world with an incredible refinement of experience. You knew John Updike, as I did, and there's a wall of his books
I see
right
his
there.
books on the walls here.
Speak about
John Updike
him.
is so important for me, partly because he changed my life. He reviewed my books 3 times in New Yorker, and that helped me in the United States, and I was safe by books. I begin to find my readers here. So many people had helped me in the United States, from Updike to my agent, my writer friends, while I was being chased, crushed by Erdogan's people in Turkey. For me, United States means liberties. First of all, free speech, liberties. You can be yourself here and enjoy the liberties that is given to me. That is why, along with Erdogan, I am very upset that Trump won these elections. I am guessing that bad times is coming. I'm not only worried about American culture, American museums, American universities, where Trump may cut the money, and all of my professor friends are talking about that. What if he cuts the federal aid to Colombia and all the universities? They would have a hard time. All sorts of problems may be coming. But I've been living with these problems for the last 50 years in Turkey, and I survived writing my novels once in a while, ignoring, running away from these problems to my historical fiction, to my novels. Sometimes they say, I think it was in Nathaniel West, Miss Lonely Hearts.
Yes.
The guy is in trouble and he says, art is a way out. Someone sends Miss Lonely Hearts a complaining letter, and the guy next to him, of course, that is irony. The tongue-in-cheek, he says, art is a way out. Yeah, art is a way out. And I've been writing novels, and I still manage to survive.
I love the smile on your face when you speak about Updike. What a wonderful reader he was, and he read everything.
He read everything. I've learned so much from all these writers. And I also learned the idea, such as Faulkner, and there are so many writers that focus on your corner of the world. Yes, the way you say global, I understand, more or less famous writer. Right now, or for the last 10 years, I'm writing novels knowing that they will be translated to 50 languages. That is an anxiety, you know. And I'm also asking myself this question ethically. Am I changing my voice to satisfy or thinking about these readers? And my answer, I never changed my voice when my whole aim in early life was to reach some Turkish readers. As my readership grew, did I change my voice? How did this happen? I tried to avoid to ask these questions to myself. But yes, as you ask them, they are inevitable. But in the end, I decide about the subjects of my novels, the novels that I'm going to write in 10 years, take notes for these novels. And I'm not rushing to satisfy the global demand. I myself write my books better. The more private I am, the more I achieve to forget about my fame or my international audience. The more you forget about the real world, the more you focus about yourself, the more you can write a new black book, A Strangeness in My Mind, a new My Name is Red.
You are famous among Armenians all over the world for saying, and you're the only one in Turkey who says it, 1 million Armenians were killed in Turkey, and I'm the only one who says it. It's true. Kurds too. You have put yourself on the line in defense of a value that you love. I guess I'm looking around our country. A lot of people are worried about values that we must be ready to defend.
Of course, free speech, autonomy of the universities, the rule of law and order, respect to constitutions, these are at stake, whether it's Erdogan or Trump in power. We writers, I am the vice president of Penn International. We defend these values.
Yeah.
But that's not the only thing I do in my life, you know.
Of course not. I guess I'm wondering what more we need to be doing.
I think reading novels, being interested in art, going to museums is a sort of resistance to Trumpian world, if you're asking me that. A person who is coming from another country and giving advice what these people should live and what they are failing at is not a nice thing. It's an imperialist thing that Western powers do to Turkey. I don't want to go to Paris and say, you French, you're doing fine in this, but you're not doing fine in this. I think you have to be educated. I don't like this attitude. You're forcing me to that direction.
I'm simply
You don't say, no, you're doing that. Stop about asking me about American politics, please, okay? If you have other questions about my work, or anything about life painting, literature, if you ask me about what is the best writer who does great paintings, I can give you an answer. I can talk about these things.
How does America feel to you when you get off the plane and back in your New York digs? Do we seem like ourselves?
When I come to New York, I'm happy that I'm away from Erdogan's Turkey, and the liberties that Columbia University and United States had given me is much more than it's given to me in Turkey. In Turkey, I used to have 3 bodyguards. Now I have 1, and I called it progress. I don't have bodyguards in New York, and no one is curtailing me my voice. Yes, Trump may do such nasty things in future, but we are not there yet, while Erdogan is putting anyone who is criticizing him into prison. Forget about what I feel about in American airports or how I'm losing my temper, sir.
Don't lose your temper. Calm down, Orhan, as the man said in this wonderful book. Calm down, Orhan.
Thank you for reminding me I should calm down. I prefer to talk about my books than how it feels in America. You are manipulating me, which you should not do. And I say, I don't want political questions, and you still continue to ask political questions. Manipulation is not a good thing, sir. How can I answer where America is going? Everyone is waiting to Trump to go to Washington, and everyone is curious. Only fools can make predictions, and no one knows. If you ask me what will happen in the future, I always say, I am a historical novelist, sir. You should ask these questions to a science fiction writer who would very well predict to you what will happen in 4 years.
I think of you, Orhan, and traveling novelists in a general way as a kind of diagnostician, an observer, a listener, a noticer.
I am a listener of people, situations, landscapes, memories, mysterious, strange things in towns, but not general observations about politics, and especially predicting politics of future is something I always avoid doing.
Let's leave out the P word, shall we say. Maybe the most comfortable thing for you would be to talk about what you love about America.
What I like about America, and it still continues, are the liberties, the libraries, the museum. Now we can watch that on TV. And when I was here 20 years ago, first time, the cinemas, the culture, the openness of Metropolitan. Metropolitan is 35 minutes of walk from my house, and I go to museums in New York all the time. These are the things. And also all the international intellectuals are there, that it's at least at Columbia, professors are welcoming. These things are, for me, the things that I care and value and deeply grateful about American culture. Trump may destroy these things, and I understand the anxiety that in January he will be in power, but we cannot predict that he will do this, he will do that. We'll see what happens.
What's the best novel of the Middle East in our time? What's the best learned, imaginative, constructive vision?
Middle East is another big category in my imagination because it's a geographical category and mostly intertwined with military operations. So I don't see a total Middle East. And in the end, I focused my life reading Proust, Thomas Mann, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky. These are my heroes. If you ask me, the Virginia Woolf or Saul Bellow or George Louis Borges, these are my heroes. I can be happy talk about them, yes.
I want to be constructive. Is there a way out of this little head-butting thing?
Maybe you can ask a question like, You're
manipulating me now, but go ahead.
Yeah, but you need some manipulation because your mind is only focused about American politics, and you're misjudging me, You have a great library, by the way, great books here. Would you please ask a question about this book?
Would I? Of course.
Okay, I'm waiting. Do you want some help with the question?
No. It turns out that some writers are incredibly visual. Tolstoy, for example.
Yes.
You think of Levin in the field with the peasants on the side. You think of him dancing with Kitty. You think of all these pictures that give me goosebumps just to think about them. And others like Dostoevsky don't give you pictures. They give you arguments and notions and characters and words.
Shall we talk about Tolstoy? You said you want to talk about Tolstoy.
There were many Tolstoys, including the historian, I suppose, the Anna Karenina Tolstoy, the idealist at the end who wanted to save the world. I guess that's the one I want to interview first. The idealist, the moralist, the world saver.
I admire Tolstoy a lot. He was, from time to time, moralist. From time to time, the great novelist in him killed the novelist, suppressed the novelist, wrote the great novel. As he was finishing Anna Karenina, Tolstoy was also worried about what is this upper-class adultery novel that I'm writing. He was a Christian, Orthodox, and his morals contradicted his sense of the novel, while he, I think, suppressed his moralism and finished Anna Karenina the way it should be finished. Also, Tolstoy's book about art, his moralism, I respect that. But he was much greater, much deeper writer when he wrote novels with less moral attitudes and energy.
What would you want to ask him if he walked into this room? An old man who'd done it all.
I would not take his time. I have so much respect for Tolstoy. I visited Tolstoy's house, which I cared about, and went to his grave. These were very memorable moments for me, and I wrote about it, and I drew a picture in Memories of Distant Mountains.
Yes.
It's included.
It's a very fascinating page. I think I could find it. You're the novelist. Maybe I'm the moralist, but I'm deeply curious about what Tolstoy would tell us if we could just stand aside.
If we are moralists, we have to also morally ask this question. Sir, would you please give me advice how I reform myself? You are asking me this question. How do I see the situation morally in the world or in America? And it's a moral attitude not to give an answer to that. I also, and this is a Dostoevskian subject, do not like people who try to prove that they are morally superior to other persons, to their friends, to their acquaintances, to their professor friends, or to this nation, to Americans, Turks. I think it is a moral outlook, moral attitude to suppress, to curtail your moral judgments a bit. I am like that. If I have strong moral ideas, I project them to my novels. But I don't say, well, this happened to this, it was very immoral. I don't say that. I perhaps describe the situation. I don't say, so-and-so voted Trump, it's immoral. I don't want to say that. It's a wrong decision, it's a bad decision, I'm sorry. But in the end, judging people, morality, is not a good thing for a novelist. But yes, all novelists have a moralist strength. But the more moralist you are, the more you will not be able to identify with your characters. Moralists make good points about how we should live, but most of the time they would not write a good novel. I have to go in 10 minutes, I'm sorry. I apologize for failing to answer your questions. I really apologize.
I don't apologize, just you observe with your eyes, your ears, and your reading. Unlike almost anybody I can think of, what are you seeing these days in America?
In America, I see a great panic that what New York Times predicted, that it was a 50-50 situation, unfortunately is not, that Trump is ahead of the Democrats. And then now there is a panic, which I agree with. I also share that panic with my Columbia professor friends. What would Trump do? Would Trump destroy the liberties in the United States? Because of the rest of the world is looking at these liberties, it may be a catastrophe for the rest of the world. But trying to predict the future is wrong. And I always crack this joke when they ask, what would Trump do? Are you afraid? Well, I am a historical writer, not a science fiction writer. You have to ask about your predictions about future to them. But it's sad that American people voted for Trump. It is as sad as Turkish people voting for Erdogan. And in the end, one leads his or her own life, writes the book that I want to write. The victory of Trump or Erdogan would not change the novels that I'm been planning for many years. I'm going to continue to write my novels. Yes, I have so many friends like you who were all worried about the last elections, the situation of the country. I think I survived because I managed to put some distance with these problems. My friends were more dedicated, more honorable, more ethical, and they all ended up in jail or their lives were destroyed. Perhaps partly because I was cautious that I survived and managed to write my books. In America, up to now, the problem is not being cautious. Trump did not put anyone into jail up to now, but he may begin doing that, and that will be very interesting to see, but it's not very close up to now. I cannot predict. Don't force me to predict.
I'm not asking you to predict.
Okay.
How does your heart register the protests at Columbia in the past year, and there'll doubtless be more of them?
I'm a professor at Columbia, so I'm witnessing that these brave, courageous students are protesting what's happening about the war in Gaza. But then after a while, it's been going on since April, they're also a bit tired and also depressed. Columbia is also controlled by police, by government. Professors, we are all confused. We want to defend our liberties, our free speech. My Columbia professor friends and also my friends in Turkey, our first thing is defending free speech. Both Erdogan and Trump is a threat to free speech.
Orhan Pamuk, thank you. This is my second long conversation with you on record. You're provocative. You're prickly. I think you're defensive.
Thank you for the wonderful questions. It was a joy to talk. I'll come back again.
Orhan Pamuk is Turkey's best-selling and most honored writer for novels like My Name is Red and The Museum of Innocence. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2000. 2006. His new book is a collection of notebook drawings and diary entries from the last 15 years, titled Memories of Distant Mountains. Here at Open Source, the social media news is that we're now on Blue Sky, microblogging away. Find us there at radioopensource.bsky.social. It's also the end of the year season to remind you that Open Source counts on listener support. If you haven't done your part yet, please go to radioopensource.org/donate and pitch in to keep the world's first and longest running podcast going strong. And thank you.